Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about bitwise operators in JavaScript. Now in our previous video we looked at logical operators. The way of thinking about these bitwise operators are similar to logical operators, but there's some different signs and some additional signs that were not in our logical operators. So let's jump into it. So we'll create our new file, we'll call it bitwiseoperators.js. Now what we want to do in our file is we want to create two variables that we can compare, okay? So the two variables that we're going to create, we're going to need to know what they are in a binary format. So if you don't know about binary, you don't know how to convert binary numbers to decimal or decimal numbers to binary, I would suggest that you go and look at our binary numbers videos, and then you can come back to this video and you'll have a better understanding of what we're about to do. So we're going to define two variables. We're going to keep the numbers low for this example because it'll hopefully make it a little bit easier for you guys to understand. So we'll start off with saying let, and we'll just call them num1 and num2. So num1, and we're going to set it equal to the number 5. Okay, and then we're going to set our second num equal to 1. So we'll have let num2 equals 1. Now if you've watched our binary videos, you'll know what 5 and 1 are in a binary format. So I'm going to do this just at the top, so we'll give ourselves a little bit of space, and we just want to say that we know that 5 is equal to or equivalent to the number 0, 1, 0, 1 in binary, and then our number 1 is equal to or equivalent to 0, 0, 0, 1. So we're just going to comment this out. You don't have to write this down. This is just to try and help you understand the concept of this video. So I'm going to comment this out, and the first bitwise operator that we're going to look at is the AND operator. Now if you remember from our previous video where we talked about the logical operators, we had an AND sign which looked something like this, okay? And we used two of them together. So you might remember in the previous video that I said we can't use a single AND sign, and the reason for that is because a single AND sign is used in bitwise operators, which is what we'll be dealing with today. So let's just do a console log, and we're going to use our two numbers that we specified, and we're just going to go and see the output, and we'll see does it make any sense to you. So we'll start off with our console.log, and inside our console log we'll just put in whatever number you have. You could put like the number 5 here, and then you could put an AND sign and 1, but since we have our nums defined, our num1 and our num2, you can put num1 and then our ampersand and our num2. So if we go and run this, we can see what sort of output we get. So if we run this, we get the number 1. Now does this make much sense? Probably not. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, so we've started off with our number 5, and then we've used this AND operator, and we've used the number 1. So you might be thinking like, oh, 5 plus 1 or 5 and 1 or something like that would maybe equal 6, or if you were to take it away it would equal 4, or you know, you might be a little bit confused on what's happening here. So to find out exactly what's happening, we have to look at our binary numbers here, and this is why it's so important that we know how to convert our normal numbers, the numbers that we use every day, into its binary format. So when we go and look at these, we look at them column by column by column by column. So you can see here that there's 4 columns, and when we look at the value in the rightmost column, so this one here, the one that has 1 and 1 in it, we're checking to see if both of those values have 1 in it. And if both of those numbers have 1 in it, we can say that it's true. So if I come down to this next line here, and let's say I was here, I could say there's 1 in the top row and there's 1 in the bottom row. So I could say that's equal to 1. Then if I look at the next column here, it's 0 and 0. So you know, neither of these have 1 in it, so that would be equal to 0. And then if I go and I look at the third column here, I have a 1 and I have a 0. So again, as I mentioned before, you know, if we have just a single 1 or if it's all zeros, we can't bring a 1 down to the next line because we're using this AND operator. So when we're using AND, both of them have to be 1 or both of them have to be true. So again, here would be 0 as well. And then for the fourth column, it's the same as our second column here. Both of the values are 0. So again, we'll be bringing 0 down to the next line. And what we end up with here is the number 0001. And 0001 in binary is equal to the number just 1 in our normal numbering system that we're used to dealing with. So again, we'll just comment that out, but I'll leave it there because it might help you understand it. Now you probably have a good idea of why we got 1 as our result here. So imagine we picked two other numbers. So imagine we picked, let's say 8, and for our second number we'll pick 2. Could you imagine what our outcome would be? So I want you to think about this yourself for a second, but I'll write down the binary numbers of 8 and 2. So 8 in binary is equivalent to 1000, so it kind of looks like 1000, and our number 2 in binary is 0010. So, you know, just by looking at this, you don't have to really do too many calculations, but if you look at this first row here, you can see that there's a 0 and a 0, so you'd bring down a 0 here. And if you look at the second column, there's a 0 and a 1, so again, you can't bring down 1 in this case either, it would be 0. And same here, 0 and 0 would be 0, and again 1 and 0, so again they're not both 1, so it would also be 0. So our outcome for this would be 0000. So that's nothing, right? That's equivalent to 0, nothing. So if we go and run this code, does that mean that we're going to get 0 as our output? Well, let's check it out. So I'm just going to get rid of this here, because if we don't get rid of this, we'll get a compiler error and we'll not actually be able to run our code. So once I've just got rid of that, I'll go up and I'll hit the run button, and we can see that we actually do get 0. And you can play around with this, you can put in different numbers. So, you know, I know for example 7 would probably be a better number, because 7 is equal to 0 with 3 1s. And then if we just left the number 2 there, or even better if we left 3, I know 3 in binary is 0011, so we should get a better output for these numbers. So I'll just go and hit run, and you can see that our number that we get is 3. Again, feel free to plug in different numbers and mess around with this yourself, but you should have the basic idea now of our AND operator. Now, if you can grasp the AND operator, the OR operator is quite similar, but rather than having these numbers and checking to see if both the columns have 1, if either of them have 1, it's kind of good enough, and you can bring 1 down to the next line. So for our previous example, or our first example where we had 5 and 1, if we go through this example really quickly, we can see in this case we have 1 and 1, so 1 and 1 again is 1, because either one of them has to be 1. In this we have 2 zeros, so there's not much we can do about that. In this one here we have 1 1, so we can actually bring down the 1 because we've got 1, and in the last column again it's going to be 0. But from looking at this, we should now get our output as 5. So let's go and run this and see if we're correct. Now again, our OR operator is very similar to our logical operator, so rather than using 2 pipe symbols, we can just get away with using 1. So this is what it'll look like. So now we're going to go up and we're going to hit run, and we'll see our output, and we can see that 5 is our output. So we now know how to deal with our OR operator and our AND operator. There's a few other operators that we have to learn about. That'll be coming up in our next video.